Hey, uh, good morning, everybody. It's Monday. It's Monday. Beautiful spring day, looks like here in Maine. Had some not so great weather over the weekend and had some great weather over the weekend here in Maine. And thank you for just joining me. I'm going to talk, actually, don't know what the title of this thing says, but I'm going to talk about shamanism this morning. I'm going to go through, I'm going to do a basic introduction to shamanism. People are joining so quickly, it's like spinning by. Good morning to you. I haven't talked about shamanism in a while. And this morning I was like, I haven't talked about shamanism in a while, and that is my spirit. Shamanism is my spirituality. It's my main form of practice and informs my belief system and that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what shamanism is, at least from my perspective. Shamanism and the word shaman and all of that. I'm going to talk about where they come from. I'm going to talk about the cultural appropriation thing. We'll talk about all of that stuff. So hopefully it'll be informative, right? Hopefully we can learn some stuff together and talk about shamanism. And thank you for everybody who's joining in right now. It's exciting, live over many different channels at this point on this Monday morning, and I have allergies. It's springtime. It's kind of bad this morning. I will take some medication after this. I don't take medication for allergies every day, but today feels like I'm gonna need it. So if you hear me sniffling, my apologies, but that's what's going on. Is spring has sprung, there's pollen in the air, and we're talking about shamanism here today. So uh if you've tuned in before, you know that I always like to define my terms a little bit and talk about what I'm uh, what I mean when I say something like shamanism or the word shaman and that sort of thing. So I'm going to define shamanism. It is relatively complex and it is a challenging word to define. Um, Even anthropologists struggle with it a little bit because it's applied to lots of different practices and things like that. And they will refer to like Native American medicine men as a shaman, right? Even though that's not a native word. There are native words for that, and there are words for what we call shaman in just about every you know in just about every indigenous culture in the world. Um, so let's get into it. Let's talk about what I mean when I use the word shaman or shamanism, and also where does that word come from? And is it okay to use that word if I'm a native English speaker? Is it okay to apply that label to somebody? And I'll tell you this as well, that in my tradition, the tradition that I come from, one does not refer to oneself as a shaman. So you won't hear me saying I am a shaman, except in that phrase, just saying that I don't say that. Um, Other people can call me their shaman or call me a shaman. That's fine. I won't necessarily correct them, although I will probably say I refer to myself as a shamanic teacher or a shamanic practitioner. Um, but I don't claim to understand that rule completely, other than it is meant to keep people from getting a swelled head, right? From um, getting hubris and getting braggy about what they're doing spiritually. That's my understanding of it anyway. That's the way it was taught to me. So I stick to that rule. It's really one of very, very little dogma that I know about shamanism. So the word shaman came into English 325 years ago. For people who seem to think it was adopted into the English language in the 1980s or something like that, or people are stealing it today or whatever, just know that its first written appearance in English was 325 years ago. We don't have another word in English for it. And um, 80% of the English language is borrowed from other languages, and many words we use every day are much younger than the word shaman. It's just that it's a spiritual word, and a lot of people get real sensitive about that, right? They're like, oh, we can't use other people's spirituality. And my answer to that is I'm not. I am not teaching anybody else's spiritual systems. I don't teach Native American spirituality. I am not Native American. I don't identify as Native American. I don't present myself as Native American. Native American spirituality, probably, like day-to-day spirituality, should not be referred to as shamanism, because it's not. But the word came into English over 300 years ago. It's been around that long. We don't have a different word for it, so I'm going to continue to use that word. And I will continue to educate people on where that word came from. Where did it come from? It came into English from Russian and German. And before that, it came from the Tungus people of Siberia, right? There was a delegation or whatever that went to meet the Tungus people, and these people doing these ceremonies and these spiritual things, and they're like, this is and it's actually, I think, pronounced saman there, saman, so it's not even the same word. However, that word did not appear out of thin air to the Tungus people of Siberia. I don't believe that. And the reason I don't believe that is that that exact word appears in Sanskrit and Akkadian and Pali, and different Chinese languages have that word, and they all mean somewhat similar things. They all mean like spiritual functionary or monk or something along those lines. So that word, whatever the root of the word shaman is, predates the Tungus language, probably predates any existing language we have today, whether it's Proto-Indo-European or whatever. Linguists haven't quite fully constructed it yet. In fact, classifying the Tungus language has proven to be pretty controversial with linguists. So I don't claim to know all of the debate there and that sort of thing. But I know, the word shaman appears, in Pali, which is the language of the Buddha. It means ascetic monk or holy person or whatever. So anyway, so that's where the word comes from. The word shaman, shamanism, is used to describe the practices and beliefs of people that we refer to as a shaman. And these days, there are people in South America that we refer to as shamans. We say South American shamanism, we say Celtic shamanism, we say Norse shamanism. All of those cultures had their own words for what they do, and some of them still do. So I don't remember the Celtic word, but there's a Celtic word for, particularly an Irish Celtic word for somebody who would go into trance and then recite poetry, which was um, predicting the future, like doing divination through poetry, kind of thing. That is shamanic or shamanistic. Okay, in Norse tradition, you have the Volva, who are witches who would come into a village, and they would throw a banquet, and they would sit in a high seat and hold the staff and put their robe on and sing into a trance, and then tell people's futures. That's shamanistic practice. I'll get into what I mean by shamanistic as opposed to shamanic. That's a little bit of a tricky spot there. So, shamanism, to me, the way that I describe it, if somebody asks me what is shamanism, I would describe it in 3 ways. I would say that shamanism is first and foremost a set of spiritual practices that are common across cultures all over the world. So cultures all over the world practice what we call shamanism. They predate They are prehistoric. We have evidence for shamanic practice in cave art that is tens of thousands of years old, and in grave goods and things like that. We cannot completely deconstruct what people were doing, 30,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. But shamanism may be as old as humankind, and there may have been shamanic practices amongst non-Homo sapiens, so other types of being. We see sort of religious, religion's a weird word, but we see spiritual practices or belief in afterlife, things like with Neanderthals, for example, where they buried their dead with grave goods. You only do that if you have some belief in a spirit or an afterlife, right? So it may predate anatomically modern humans. So that would be hundreds of thousands of years old, potentially. We don't know. Nobody was writing anything down then. It definitely predates written language. We know hunter-gatherers were definitely practicing shamanism. I would say it predates probably any existing culture on this planet now. So from that perspective, shamanism, I think, I think shamanism, the practice of shamanism, as it's taught in what we call core shamanism, is every person on this planet's birthright. Everybody on this planet who lives, no matter who your ancestors were, no matter what culture you grew up in, you have shamanic ancestors. Your ancestry goes back, thousands of generations, and we all came from the same place. We all came out of Africa, if you go back far enough. And there is there are lots of forms of shamanism in Africa. So, some of the oldest sort of continuous culture we have knowledge of are some of the Aboriginal cultures in Australia, and they are shamanic. They have shamanic practices. So these are practices that predate everything, every known religion. They probably come out of animism. So animism is the belief in spirits that are not just human, but spirits in animals, spirits in plants, spirits in rocks and the sky, and that sort of thing. The technical definition of animism is extending personhood, the status of personhood, to non-humans. It's the technical definition. But what I mean when I talk about animism is that I see spirit in everything, in my phone, in my laptop, in you, in me, in my dog, and my front door, and my house. Everything is a spirit. Some things have physicality. So the main practice that defines something as shamanism is called journeying. At least in English, we call it journeying. It has three components. So I'm still talking about the first component of shamanism. The first component of shamanic journeying is what we call an altered state of consciousness, right? This state, having been studied recently using equipment that can measure brain waves and activity in different regions of the brain, we know is completely unique to people practicing shamanism. You do not enter into this brain state from taking drugs. You do not enter into this brain state from being hypnotized. You do not enter into this brain state from, I don't know, dancing, unless you're, dancing shamanically. So it is a very specific effect. I refer to it as the shamanic state of consciousness. The closest thing to that in this research that I've read is somebody who is on magic mushrooms or psilocybin, but it's unique to that. It's not the same thing. So there are many ways that shamans do this. I'll get into that in a moment. So journeying, altered state of consciousness. During that altered state of consciousness, part of a shaman's consciousness is able to leave the body and travel in other worlds, what we refer to as non-ordinary reality, what other cultures might refer to as dream time or the other world or the underworld, or there's all kinds of different terminology for this. Watching from Australia as an adopted member of the largest Aboriginal tribe in Central Desert where they still practice their ceremonies. Finding this very interesting. Don't agree we come out of Africa. Um, well, I mean, maybe not everybody, but certainly I'm not going to argue that point. I think the scientific consensus is that humankind, and maybe it, and certainly that could change. Certainly, Homo sapiens, they may find research that we didn't evolve, uh, didn't completely evolve in Africa. I haven't seen that disproven yet, but you know, um, but I think it's safe to say that Homo sapiens, as a species, wherever we came from, we evolved in the same place. And there were a lot of human species. There were a lot of competing human species over the ages. From Neanderthals to Denisovans to who knows. They're still discovering new species of what they call humans. But so anyway, um, so shamans go into an altered state. They travel in what I'm going to refer to as non-ordinary reality, so they can go into the spirit world, and they work with helping spirits. So they work with it's a theory. Yeah, I know it's a theory. There's no uh maybe people came from Australia. That's very possible. I mean, Australia is certainly um uh home to the I mean, I don't have to tell you, but it's certainly home to the oldest continuous surviving cultures on the planet. So very, very interesting. Interesting stuff there. So um anyway, I'm not an anthropologist. I just read stuff. So absolutely happy to be proven incorrect about that. Um, so altered state of consciousness, travel in the spirit world, working with helping spirits. Those three things are what I would call shamanic practice or journeying. Sometimes cultures don't do all three of those things. And so I kind of, and this is just me. Again, I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not looking at like academic definitions of stuff. I would call that shamanistic practice. So, for example, a practice that I am very familiar with and practice myself comes from the Norse culture, and it's called Seidr. Seidr or Seidr, depending on which language you're saying it in. Does use altered states, and it does work with helping spirits, but instead of traveling in the spirit world most of the time, the spirits are called in to work with them. So it doesn't have all three of those components. So I kind of say, okay, it's shamanistic because you're still doing a lot of the same stuff. Okay. So those practices are one way that I describe shamanism. Shamanism, uh, so the second way I describe shamanism is that it encompasses certain worldviews, right? So while shamanism is not a religion, there's no dogma and there's no doctrine, there's no religious authority. It's just a description of certain types of beliefs. And any place that practices shamanism, it is always happening through the lens of that culture, right? So shamanism works within a culture, but it doesn't overarch that culture. So if you go to Nepal and witness Nepalese shamans, they're going to be working with certain deities, for example, that you wouldn't find in South America. In South America, They might be working with spirits of eagles and condors that don't exist in other parts of the world. And they will have different ceremonies, they will have different tools that they use, but there's enough overlap in what they're doing that we can say this is a shamanic culture. This is a culture that practices shamanism. This is a culture that has people who fulfill the role of shaman, right? A shaman is somebody who is a spiritual functionary that works usually on behalf of a tribal group or family or some larger group to do things like heal and to teach and provide information. In some cultures, like in Hawaii, for example, you have the kahuna. The kahuna, we refer to as shamans, had various specialties and have. There are still kahuna today. Have various specialties such as plant medicine or healing with words or healing with massage and body manipulation. It's not just healing either. It might be navigation would be a specialty, particularly on the ocean, which is very important to ocean voyaging cultures, right? So again, shamanism always viewed through the lens of whatever specific culture it comes out of. But it encompasses a worldview. And like I said, shamanism and animism really go hand in hand. Shamanism probably comes out. There's no way to prove this, but animism probably came first. Shamanism probably came out of that, but who knows? And animism is seeing spirits in things that we don't think of as human and extending personhood to those things. So, and everybody or most people do this to some extent, right? If you talk to your dog like your dog is a human being, or you talk to your car, or you name your house, or that sort of thing. You talk to the trees. I realize not everybody does that. I do that. I talk to the trees. Trees are very interesting. They have very distinct, each tree has a very distinct personality. Some of them are grumpy, some of them are fine. But a lot of them, particularly where I live, have been around for a very long time. So the things they have witnessed. So there's that part of it is that there has to be a belief in spirits. If you don't believe in spirits, then you wouldn't really be doing shamanism, right? You wouldn't be working with spirits. Um, Usually in most cultures, even non-shamanic cultures, ancestors play a really big part in what you're doing. So I do a lot of ancestral work on my own and with clients and that sort of thing, and with students. I do quite a lot of ancestral work. Um, so there's that part, and then there is, and I realize this is not unique to shamanism, that there are lots of cultures that have this idea of the interconnection between at least all beings, but all things, the interconnectedness of all things. Like we're all connected underneath it all. And that's an important viewpoint. So, for example, when I work on myself, when I do healing work on myself, I view that as healing the world. Why? Because I'm connected, and even in a small kind of surface way, if I'm not running around acting like a jerk, the world benefits from that, right? The people that I interact with, the people, my children, um, my my clients, my students. If I'm working on myself and not running around like a jerk, um, that is better for the world, right? So that's one viewpoint of it, and that's on a very, very surface layer. There are many, many layers underneath all of that. So that's kind of the second component. So the first component is this practice, these tools, shamanic journeying. There'll be lots of other tools that are usually culturally specific. So like ceremonies, ways of entering into altered states. I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, There are lots of different ways of entering into the shamanic state of consciousness. Um, Many people think about plant medicine, right, or using entheogens or hallucinogens, drugs, that sort of thing, psychedelics. And there are cultures that use psychedelics as part of their shamanic ceremony, but it is not the majority of cultures. And there are many, many ways to enter into shamanic state of consciousness. And I also think this is my personal opinion, is that you probably should not be messing with plant medicine if you are not using it in the context, in cultural context, with somebody who really knows what they're doing. So like a trained, like if you want to take ayahuasca, for example, and everybody seems to be doing ayahuasca these days, it can actually be really dangerous. You should be doing that with somebody who has received a lot of training in proper cultural context. I can't tell you how to find that person. I don't know myself. I do know people who have had really bad ayahuasca experiences. I know of people who have died. I know of people who have been hospitalized after drinking ayahuasca. It is not a harmless substance when done recreationally. It's also, I think, kind of dishonoring to cultures that use plant medicine to use them recreationally or lightheartedly. These are serious, serious things to the cultures that use them, and I think you should respect that. So, so there's the practices, the viewpoint, and the third part for me is usually there's in most shamanic cultures there is a call to awakening. Now the role of shaman can be depending on your culture, can be inherited. So you could come from a family of shamans, um, or you could be elected or chosen somehow, but there's usually some sort of crisis that you go through, and that could be a crisis of health, or a crisis of, a mental health crisis, or something happens, you have a near death experience, you're struck by lightning, you're born with birth defects. In some cultures, that's an indicator that you are chosen to be shamanic. I'm not saying that's true in my culture, but I was born with birth defects. I, found shamanism later in life, and it seemed to be a good place for me. Um, so there are indicators, and again, those can be culturally specific, but um, the practice of shamanism, the ability to enter the shamanic state of consciousness, is something that as far as I know, every human brain is capable of doing that. But some people take to it better than others, and those people tend to have been through some kind of trauma or crisis or something like that. And then in some cultures where people are chosen to be shamans, or they're inherited or whatever, there can be rites of passage prior to shamanic training that put people through a crisis, that put them through an ordeal, even bringing them close to death. You'll often hear about these, like, these vision quests, which can really tax people, where you go for extended periods of time without food or drink, out by yourself. And so there's a lot of, like, sensory deprivation sometimes. Lots of different ways to do this, lots of different ceremonies. Sometimes there are ceremonies that cause significant amounts of pain, and that will, if you've ever been in severe pain, that can cause you to actually dissociate. And that's, not to get too psychologically technical, but really what you're doing when you're journeying is you're dissociating, you're leaving your body behind. And the ability to do that is, if you have trauma in your past, frequently a response to that, a survival mechanism response to that, is dissociation. That happens to make dissociation tends to make people better at doing shamanism. So, um, So there's that. There's the call to awakening. So those are the three things: the set of practices that we kind of define as shamanic or shamanistic, um, a worldview that's held in common amongst shamanic peoples, and and again, everything through cultural lenses, right? Everything fits in through people's culture, through their mythology, through their cosmology, through their language. Language shapes how we think. And then the call to awakening, which I think is the archetypal call of the shaman. And the if you look at like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? If you study that or watch Star Wars, watch all the Star Wars movies, um, you will see uh, that um, the hero's journey is an allegory for me. It's an allegory for shamanic initiation. The descent into the underworld and Empire Strikes Back, which was always my favorite movie, even since I was a kid. Really, really is a good allegory for shamanic initiation, the death and rebirth experience. And I have been through many, many initiation ceremonies that are designed to simulate death and rebirth. And even, even in the Christian church, when you have, being born in some Christian churches, when you are born again, when you are baptized, it's a death and a rebirth, right? It's this seems to be an important thing for human beings in spirituality. So, question here: what is happening with your consciousness slash soul? It's a lot of S's for me to pronounce together. When you dissociate. Yeah, so my take on that is that two things, there's two kinds of dissociation, but I'll talk about what's happening. One type of dissociation is called disreality. That's when you feel like the world around you isn't real, almost like you're in a dream. I experienced this a lot when I was a kid. You feel like time starts to get real bendy and things don't seem real. And it almost sounds like to me, it almost sounds like you're underwater sometimes. Like if you've ever like gone underwater with your friends and they've talked to you and try to figure out what they're saying, sometimes it can feel like that. And the second type of dissociation is called depersonalization. So there's disreality and depersonalization. And depersonalization, you leave your body. Like you feel like you're not in your body, or you feel like you're not in control of your body. That can be partial or complete. So lots of times people will talk about having surgery or being in an accident and floating up out of their body and being able to look down, or people have out of body experiences, which are a form of extreme dissociation and akin to shamanic journeying a little bit. It's a little bit different. So, what I think is happening here, well, my take on what's happening here is that we normally organize our consciousness as human beings. We normally organize our consciousness around being in our bodies, right? Being in this body, perceiving everything through our senses, through our sense organs, and we're really attached to our ego. This is me. When I point this way, this is me. When I say I, this is what I mean, right? Um, but our consciousness is actually non-local. Like our body lives inside our soul. Our soul is much, much bigger than our body, but we just don't always, we're not tuned into it. It's like right now, you're probably not aware of your big toe until I said that, right? You have a big toe, you can tune into it if you want to, you can put your attention onto it, and then you start to feel it consciously. Um, uh, so you are slipping out of your body and you're tuning your consciousness to that part of you that is outside of your body. You're also can be tuning. We're in this physical, think of this physical reality as like a station on your radio dial, right? And when we dissociate, we turn the knob. We're driving down the road and we turn the knob and we go to a different station. And so then we start to perceive spiritual reality. So in an incomplete dissociation, it's going to be very close to physical reality. And so you might see things, you might start to see auras or halos around things. You might see shadow people. And by the way, we do this all the time when we go to sleep. We this is normal. This is normal human stuff. This isn't a weird thing. Um, but also when we're traumatized, we do this when we're not asleep, and our brain is in a different state when we're traumatized. Our amygdala is going, "Hello, wake up." Um, do I think dissociation increases the risk of soul loss during a traumatic event? Dissociation causes is the main reason for soul loss during a traumatic event. What happens during trauma is part of our consciousness, part of our soul leaps away to safety, right? I feel like my life is at risk. I'm going to leap away. That's dissociation. If that part doesn't come back right after, that's soul loss. So then you need to usually see somebody to help you return that soul essence that you've lost. Um, we all have, um, everybody has little traumas that they go, even if you've never had like a big trauma in your life. We've all had a point in time where that's caused like your heart to skip a beat in your chest, right? Maybe you like almost get into a car accident and you're like, "Phew," and it alters your consciousness for at least a few minutes. But normally that consciousness comes back over some period of time. Now you might need some time to you might need some time to literally, we have phrases in English like pull yourself together, right? That's like self soul retrieval. I'm pulling myself together. Um, so for anybody who doesn't know, soul loss is probably the one of the major things that most shamans treat. It's the number one thing that people come to me for. It's usually the result of trauma. There are other things that can cause soul loss. So significant addictive behavior, particularly drug abuse, can cause soul loss. Um, but any kind of addictive behavior. So any kind of addictive behavior, especially that takes you out of your body. So even things like eating, if you're unconscious when you're eating, you're not in control of your body, your consciousness is slipping away and can get stuck. You can lose more and more touch with yourself, right? And so the two biggest indicators to me, if a client comes to me and I start talking to them about what they're experiencing in their life that made them come to see me, I will ask them about, do you ever feel, I'll ask them about dissociation. I won't say, do you dissociate? I'll say, do you ever feel like things are not real? Or that you ever feel like you're not in control of your body, almost like you're behind it, or you're floating above it, or your body is doing things and you're not even really there. You're kind of checked out. That's dissociation. And people will say yes, normally, if there is soul loss. And the other thing I'll ask is, do you ever feel disconnected? This is a big one. And this happened a lot during the time of lockdown of the pandemic. People were in shock. People were getting soul loss from the pandemic, from being locked down and not having social interaction and being stressed out. And um, so I'll say, do you ever feel disconnected from yourself or your spouse or your family? Just disconnected, just like you're out of time, out of sync. I have a lot of people, that was the number one complaint during the pandemic. I just feel really disconnected from myself. That's a symptom of soul loss to me. I'll always do work. I will mentally suspect soul loss, but I don't diagnose it without doing work, without journeying on behalf of a client. Because what do I know? I'm just a guy, I'm just a dude. I have to go confer with my spirit helpers to really figure things out. So, and apologies, I'm like touching my eyes and sniffling and stuff. It's like allergy season has hit like hardcore here in the past, particularly in the past few days. Yesterday and today is been especially bad where I am. So, but my apologies if that's comes off like I'm, got a cocaine habit or something. I don't. I promise I've never tried cocaine and I've never been tempted by it. But so yeah, so soul loss is a big thing that most practitioners will treat. If they are not, I kind of wonder what they're doing. I do have clients come to me who don't need or aren't ready for soul retrieval. Soul retrieval is the treatment for soul loss. Um, so that'll happen. It'll happen where I have sessions where there is soul retrieval is not indicated for that session, but it is my opinion. I haven't met anybody yet who could not use soul retrieval on some level. Now, some people don't have PTSD and massive dissociation and all of this stuff. But there are other things that people experience. But this sense of disconnection is a big one, and that is something that people came to me for. But yeah, to answer your question, without dissociation, there is no soul loss. So it is the major driving factor behind soul loss. So part of you can think of it as like a little version of yourself jumps away. So I don't mind. Um, it just says that my my live is age restricted. I may be talking about themes that are inappropriate for children. I don't know. I don't know what I said that's inappropriate for children. Maybe talking about trauma or something. Um, So, I don't wanna trauma dump or go into too much detail about, my own personal trauma. I don't mind talking about my traumatic history, but I also don't want to re-traumatize people or, like, dump my secondhand trauma onto anybody. But, there were times where I was a child and I was afraid for my life, and remember leaving my body during that time, and my body kept going on and doing what it was doing, trying to save itself. So, so it's it that was soul loss for me. Those parts never fully came back. Even when the trauma is over, and you kind of like, I feel like I've gone back to normal, your physiology might kind of go back to normal, but even that's going to change. Trauma changes. Trauma does. Hear me out. No, some scientists recognize this, and some do not. Trauma causes brain damage, particularly childhood trauma. And by brain damage, I mean it changes the structure of your brain, and not for the better. It's not like a traumatic brain injury, like you hit your head on something. It's not like that, but it causes parts of your brain to not talk to each other anymore. And it causes all kinds of things like hyperarousal. It exacerbates things like ADHD. Obviously, it causes all of the symptoms of PTSD, particularly childhood trauma. When the brain is developing, the brain will develop these patterns to survive the stuff that it's going through. Um, so that doesn't mean you can't live a full and normal and symptom-free life. It's just that it changes you. It does damage. Um, uh, as somebody who experienced significant childhood trauma, and who primarily lives symptom free these days, I chalk that up primarily to shamanism, to my practice of shamanism. It's the reason I started practicing shamanism. It's the reason I continue to work on myself using shamanism. Now, I will never say, uh, boy, I'm done. I'm done. Thank goodness. I did all my work. I don't ever have to work on myself again. Things are perfect. Things are hunky dory. I have exceeded to the seventh level of heaven, or whatever. I'll never say that. I will continue to work on myself. And that doesn't mean I can't teach. It doesn't mean I don't have things to offer. And I think it's quite the opposite, right? I think that my past and my healing from trauma and my continuous journey makes me better able to help. It makes me better able to understand where people are coming from, I think, and certainly makes me better able to help other people. There's a concept, and it's not unique to shamanism, but it is definitely a shamanic concept as well, of what we call the wounded healer, meaning I do not have to be completely healed myself to help others heal, right? In fact, um, my wounds now that are, part of the way healed make me a better healer. I don't really love the word healer. I realize people use it for all kinds of stuff. When I work with you, I'm not healing you. I'm working with you so that you can better heal, right? I think this is me. I think that all healing is self-healing. If you break your arm and you go to the doctor and the doctor puts a cast on your arm, the cast is not healing your arm. The cast is creating the conditions under which your arm can heal properly, right? That's what we're doing in shamanism. We are creating spiritual conditions under which you can heal, but you're doing the healing. So when I do soul retrieval ceremony for somebody, it's not yeah, sometimes there is stuff that appears almost miraculous that happens during a healing section, right? Like, for example, I had a client not that long ago who had a frozen shoulder. Did a healing ceremony with her, and the all of a sudden she could move her shoulder. It's not miraculous. There were energy blocks there that got removed, but her body still had to move through that, right? So I'm creating conditions for her body to heal. Same thing with, I've had, I remember one of my very first clients ever, somebody came in, and I don't give personal information about clients away ever. So I'm going to talk in very, very generic terms here. Somebody came in and told me that um, he felt dead inside. That's another indicator of soul loss. I feel dead inside. I don't feel anything, like I'm dead. Um, okay, and I worked with him and did a bunch of ceremonial work, including soul retrieval. And when I was done, I'm like, well, how are you feeling? Is, oh my God, I feel joy inside for the first time that I can remember. I feel really like he felt amazing. That happens during the session, but that's not the end of the healing work, right? Then he's got to leave and he's got to, you know, integrate that healing into his life so it sticks, so it stays, so he continues to feel that joy, right? You can get a little bump. You can go to you can go, I don't know if they do this anymore, but you used to be able to go get like a B12 shot from your doctor and it would like pump you full of energy. Or you can go get I don't know, you can take a drug, you can drink coffee and feel full of energy. I feel full of energy. But then if I just go back to bed and I lay down and I close my eyes, like that energy is going nowhere. It's not doing anything for me, right? But I drink a coffee, I get started with my day, and then I can do some things that get my energy flowing. I can move, I can exercise, I can do I can do the work. This is a helper. That's what I do in healing sessions. I'm helping, but you're doing the healing. You're healing yourself. It's like hypnosis. There are some people who say all hypnosis is self-hypnosis because there is a cooperation with the person who is helping you enter into hypnosis. I do think it's possible to hypnotize. There's always a question, can you hypnotize somebody against their will? And the answer to that is yes, but only if they don't know you're doing it. So if I, you know, if I, so I, I'm also a certified hypnotherapist. If I go, you're getting sleepy, I never, I wouldn't do that. But if I do something and I tell you, okay, go in a trance right now, you're sleepy. And you go, I'm not doing that. You're not going into trance. But I watched a TED Talk by a hypnotherapist recently, and it was absolutely brilliant. He hypnotized the entire audience without them knowing it, and then he brought some people up on. He was kind of doing a stage hypnosis thing, which I don't do, but um, in stage hypnosis, a big part of what you're doing. I'll give some secrets away of stage hypnosis. If you ever gone to a stage hypnosis show, the hypnotist who's on stage always does audience work first. So the entire audience is like, okay, now I'm going to demonstrate the power of your imagination. Everybody hold your arms out and imagine that to your left wrist is tied a balloon, and in your right wrist you're holding a heavy rock. Imagine it's pulling, it's pulling, it's pulling, it's pulling, it's pulling, right? So, and then everybody's like, oh, he's demonstrating, hypnotic principles. And what he's actually doing is two things. One, he's pre-hypnotizing the entire room by doing something called assuming hypnotic phenomena. So anything that mimics hypnotic phenomena causes trance. So he's doing something that would take place under hypnosis. So everybody in the whole room like goes somewhat into a small trance. But he's also gauging who is most suggestible by who responds the most. And then he'll ask for volunteers. So volunteers will go up. So those people have already agreed to be part of the show and part of the thing. They've already probably been in some sort of light trance. And then he'll go through and weed people out. Right? Okay, you go, you go, you go. He'll do some things with the people on stage. Okay, you go, you go, you go, you go. So he'll pick the absolute best subjects, and he has to, because not everybody is going to be as compliant, right? So anyway, I'm watching this stage hypnotist, and he may be a hypnotherapist too. Most people who are stage hypnotists also have like a hypnotherapy business, but he starts talking in this like kind of weird metaphor, and he was giving this talk in like Switzerland, and he goes, there's three people. He goes, people ask me about trance, and there's three there's three things they say to me, and they're like, he's like, one, it's, I don't know what he said, deeply relaxing. Two, it's really, really great. And three, it's just like being in Switzerland. And the people were in Switzerland. So now their brains are going, huh, how is being in trance like being in Switzerland? And so the brains, without even thinking about it, have to start comparing those things, right? So the people's brains in the audience are like already, and he's doing a bunch of things. He's doing a bunch of linguistic things along the lines, like he's using what are called embedded commands, and all kinds of stuff. So it was pretty funny. It was a pretty funny thing, and he showed a video of somebody else demonstrating. But he's also using stories like I'm using right now, telling a story, which is another way to get people. Stories are entrancing, right? When somebody read us a bedtime story, it helped us go to sleep. When we go to the movies, sometimes the movies put me to sleep. But we enter into that world a little bit. Our consciousness shifts around. I did a talk the other day on altered states of consciousness. And, what I want to say about that is the phrase altered state of consciousness implies that there is a like normal, steady state of consciousness with everybody. And that's just not the case. We cycle through states of consciousness all the time. What we're referring to with an so we have this sort of normal range that our consciousness goes through during the day with these circadian rhythms. You can attach people to machines and watch their brain waves get faster and slower throughout the day, all of those things. And then the same thing happens at night, right? We have sleep cycles, and we go into deep sleep, and then we come back up into REM sleep, and then we go into deep sleep, and then we come back up into REM sleep. So our brains are cycling constantly through altered states or through different states of consciousness. So when I say altered state, what I'm really talking about is massive change in your perception of things, massive qualitative change in your consciousness. So you start to perceive different worlds, or split away from your body, or that sort of thing. or you start what some people might refer to as hallucinating. You know, um, a really interesting thing, and I was listening to somebody talking about, I forget the main topic of the conversation, but they were talking about how the idea that the dream world is different than the waking world, or less real or not real, is a very Western European concept, and that most indigenous peoples treat the dream world as if it is as real and sometimes even more important than the waking world. So, we spend a third of our life asleep. Why would our experiences and dreams be unimportant? Right. But that's how we treat it. We treat it as like flights of fancy or all of these things. But shamanic cultures, dreaming is really important. In many cultures, dreaming is really important. We treat it like, it's just a thing that happens. It's just a phenomenon. It doesn't have any importance at all. Till we get to psychoanalysis, right, in the Western world. And not everybody buys into that stuff. Not everybody does psychoanalytic dream analysis in Western European culture, but it's a thing. And but dreams are very important to many, many cultures. And they're not, it's your, but again, like when you're dreaming, your consciousness is qualitatively different than when you're awake. And when you're awake, we go through cycles all during the day. If you've ever been daydreaming, and who doesn't, wandering off, imagining that, oh, that beach in Hawaii that I was on a few years back, 5 years ago now, that beach in Hawaii, man, that was, and I can go off and my mind goes off and I'm like, a memory can become immersive. I can become immersed in that experience. I can feel the sensations I had. I can feel the hot sun, um, the hot sand under my feet. I can smell the coconut oil that the coconut scented sunscreen that everybody was rubbing on themselves. Like, I can revivify those memories and experience them again and go into an altered state just doing that, right? It's an altered from my sort of uptime when I'm, reading something, or writing something down or doing really analytical work, stuff that we used to call left brain. I don't know if the left brain, right brain thing is still something that people do or believe in or whatever. So anyway, thank you all for joining me today. Happy Monday. I'm going to try to do this one or two more times this week. I normally do them, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't know what my Wednesday looks like this week, so we'll see. But we'll definitely tune in again on Friday. If you're tuned in, you're interested in these live talks, again, don't forget to subscribe or like or whatever to make sure you're alerted when these happen. If you like my Facebook page, you subscribe to my YouTube channel, one of those things. This goes out over both those and more. You can get alerted when these come on, and when I schedule them, you can say, I'm interested in that. If you're interested in whatever I'm talking about, and I pick a different topic every single time I do these. So I'm also open to requests if it's something I can talk about. Like, I can't. I'm probably not going to have time to go learn something new well enough to come on here and talk about it in a way that would be interesting to anybody. But people have requested all kinds of things in the past, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to oblige. You too. You're welcome. Have a great day. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk soon. My love to you all. And if